Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to stick to Sweden, and we're also going to stick to my home county of Skåne here in the very south of the country. We're returning to a brewery that has featured on the channel a good number of times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the last little while, and it's nice to see their beers getting out there a little bit more in recent times, I would say. And I would kind of consider this brewery to be very good when it comes to lager beers. I think they're one of the best lager producers in Sweden, but they also do some very nice IPAs as well. I always keep an eye out for the different beers that they're releasing, and I think this one, it should be quite quirky compared to some of the others we've had in recent times. So fingers crossed it's a good one, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on it. So for this review then, we are going to head a little bit south of me here in Lund to Malmö once again, and we're going to return to Hyllie Bryggeri. So this particular beer is called Black Sheep. It comes in at 6% ABV, and they're describing this one as a dark hoppy lager. So when I had a little look at the Untappd page for this one earlier on, it actually said that they considered it sort of a black IPL, but when I ordered it through Systembolaget, I thought it was going to be a Schwarzbier, and like I said, I know this brewery are very good at lager beers. You know, the Finn Pilsner, the Skånsk Lager. I really like both of those. So I thought this one was going to be like an old school Schwarzbier when I got it. But I think the idea of a black IPL could really be quite interesting. And I've not had a bad beer from these guys before, so I'm really curious to see what this one has in store for us. Hyllie Bryggeri are very highly rated at the moment, so if you can get a hold of their stuff, I highly recommend that you do. The Hyllie Pan is their kind of classic flagship IPA, and then also the Skånsk Lager I think is definitely worth checking out. But yeah, this beer was released as part of the Lokal Småskalig assortment through Systembolaget here in Sweden for March of 2021, and I think I paid about 30 Swedish kroners or something like that for this one. So that translates to roughly about €3, £2.50, maybe about $3.50 American, something like that. But yeah, should be an interesting beer. As I said earlier, I hope you guys enjoy my take on it, and I'm very curious about it. So let's get cracking. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Hyllie Bryggeri before, and you will no doubt see me add more to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Hyllie Bryggeri quickly then, onto my brewery notes. So Hyllie Bryggeri, as I've told you before, started off as the home brewing experiments of Michael Nathorst, who's from Vintria, just a little bit to the south of Hyllie. And for a number of years, he was a home brewer. He built up his own brewery in his garage, and this was where he experimented with lots of different recipes with his friends, and he started brewing there in about 2013. But he worked for a number of years in the plumbing industry, and for a period of time he was working 4 days a week as a plumber, and then 1 day with his brewery. And he was also good friends with Torsten Ekne, who is the original owner of Beerditch in Malmö. And when Beerditch began, Michael decided that he was going to turn his garage brewery into a proper company, and so he registered Hyllie Bryggeri in 2015. But these days Michael is joined at the brewery by Erik Frithiof, who is a partner in the company, and he deals with the sales and marketing side of things, but he's also one of the founders of the Great Swedish Beer Festival. A little bit later on in 2019, the brewery joined forces with Cycle Pipes and Limhamns Brewery to form a new company that owns a brewery building. And it was there that the three companies were producing their beer for a period of time. They had a 1,000 litre brew kit, but unfortunately this arrangement only lasted for a few months because it just apparently didn't work out. But then Hyllie Bryggeri moved to a farm near Vintria, because it was just available to them. But throughout 2020 they've been contract brewing a number of their beers, but they've just invested in a new premises in Malmö as well, which is actually quite close to the central station. It's an old car garage, and that's going to be changed into a brewery with a 2,000 litre brewing system. They've also recruited Johan Lagerkrantz as their head brewer, and he spent the last 5 years in New Zealand working in the brewing industry down there. And as of March 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 75 different kinds of beer. But I'm sure once they get that new brewery up and running, that will increase pretty dramatically. But yeah, like I said, the best beers I've had from these guys so far, I would say the Hyllie, their flagship IPA, is really good. The Skåne Lager is nice, and you know, the I think was it the Serendipity double IPA that we had last month was pretty good as well. But yeah, I had a Rauchbock from them recently. I've had a black IPA. I'm forgetting all the different beers that I've had from them these days, but the thing that's really good about these guys is that they can put out a lot of different styles and they're consistently good. So if you can get a hold of some of the Hyllie Bryggeri beers, then I would say it is definitely worth it. But the ones you are most likely to come across, Hyllie and the Skåne Lager. The Fiend Pilsner is also fairly easy to find as well. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Hyllie Bryggeri just now. If you want to learn more, you can of course check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's get on and have a little look at this beer then. So I'll just let you have a little look at the artwork quickly before we open it up. As you can see, you've got Lucifer's goat on there, so hail Satan, just because. It's Easter Monday, so yeah, hail Satan. But yeah, you can see it there is the Hyllie Bryggeri symbol just on the front of the can there. You can see the viewfinder from the GoPro reflected in that as well, which is always lovely. But yeah, as I said, 330ml can, this one, 6% black hoppy lager, or black IPL as they were calling it on the Untappd page. Apparently this is hopped with Citra, Amarillo and Huell Melon on it. So yeah, 1 German hop, 2 American ones in there. So yeah, I can't say I've had either any of those hops in a Schwarzbier, come to think of it. So they should be quite interesting. Huell Melon, of course, one that we don't come across all that often, and like the name suggests, you tend to get quite a bit of melon out of it. So yeah, also I remember also having a little bit of a kind of lemony zesty sort of thing too before. But yeah, 6% black IPL this one, or 6% hoppy Schwarzbier, however you want to look at it. But yeah, let's have a little look at this one then and see how we get on. Yeah, very curious about this one, I have to say. The one thing I will say about this beer as well is that it says on the ingredients list that it contains wheat, which isn't that common for a lager beer. But yeah, we'll see what we get out of it. Remember, for those of you that don't know, the basic definition of a lager beer is, you know, cold temperature fermentation, bottom fermenting yeasts, usually between about 10 and 12 degrees fermentation, whereas an ale ferments at a higher temperature, usually like, you know, 16 to 18 degrees or 15 to 18 degrees, something like that. So yeah, lager beers are cold temperature fermentations. Quite technically difficult beers to brew, but yeah, it definitely says lager on this one, so this will be a cold temperature fermentation. But yeah, let me just line that up again so that my OCD is happy, and there we are. But yeah, I have to say, this certainly looks like quite a nice beer. You can see that the head on this one, I think it was a little bit higher than that before, but it's poured with about a 3/4 finger of a frothy, I would say kind of fawn coloured head. I think that's a nice kind of fawn coloured head that's on here. Very, very foamy and nice and consistent, so yeah, that looks good. And in terms of colour, if we shine the light through this one, it is actually pretty dark, so I would describe this one as a kind of dark ebony sort of colour. If you shine the light through it, you do get a little bit of that kind of Coca-Cola coloured edge to it, but not too much. But yeah, 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass on this one, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there, but I mean overall it does look pretty nice actually. But yeah, remember the colour of your beers are dependent on a couple of different things. 1, the type of malts that you use, 2, the length of your wort boil, and of course the longer you boil the wort, the more sugars caramelise, thus you get a darker colour of beer, but that's dependent on the malts you use in the first place. And then adjuncts and barrel aging can also play a role in that. But you know, this is basically a Schwarzbier, a hopped up Schwarzbier, so it is going to be a nice dark colour that you get out of this one. This one will have some darker malts in it. So yeah, in terms of what I would expect for the colour of this beer, it does look pretty good. And in terms of the kind of opacity of the beer. It does have a little bit of a kind of natural haze sort of thing, but when you're using wheat in a beer, you are going to get that, so that makes sense. But yeah, let's have a closer look at the aroma of this one and see how we got on. Nothing untoward about the appearance of this one, so aroma time, let's go for it. Now, that's quite interesting. It definitely, I mean, you can smell straight away with this beer, you can smell a little bit of a kind of brown bready, toasty bread crust sort of thing. So one of the things you'll always get, one of the main differences I've found between the Czech lagers and the German lagers, the Czech ones are always a little bit more kind of yeasty and bready, if you like, whereas the German ones are just a little bit kind of crisper. You do get a bit of breadiness out of the German ones, but they just come across as a little bit sort of cleaner and crisper, if that makes sense. This beer has a little bit of that kind of sort of Czech type vibe to it because of the breadiness that it has, but part of that will be coming from the fact that there's wheat in this. I don't think in Germany they would use wheat in lagers. I don't know about Czech right enough, because I don't know whether wheat would count as malt. Actually, that's the thing, because I don't know if the Reinheitsgebot states specifically malted barley or if it can be malted wheat, and of course they've got Hefeweizens down there, so that's the other thing. So I don't know how common it is to use wheat in German lagers. Actually, if any of you do know, let me know in the comment section below. That would be interesting to hear about. But yeah, straight away with this beer, you can smell a nice toasty, kind of well-fired bread crusty element out of it. There's definitely a bit of a kind of brown bready sort of thing. It's almost got a little touch of sweetness to it. It's a bit wholemeal and grainy, but at the same time you get a wee bit of that almost kind of rye bready type sweetness out of it. So yeah, definitely a bit of that going on. For me, there is a wee touch there is a good bit of brown sugar in this one. It's got a bit of sweet caramel, but the more you smell it, it becomes a little bit more toasty. I'm hesitant to say biscuit in this beer. It doesn't really smell like a, you know, a McVitie's digestive biscuit or anything like that. It does come across as being more, it really comes across as being a little bit more kind of, how would you say, it definitely comes across as being a little bit more kind of toasty brown sugar like rather than biscuity, if that makes sense. But yeah, it's quite a straight shooting malt base, come to think of it, but it's got a nice depth to it at the same time. It's not the most complex, but it's just got a really nice kind of resonating and deep aroma to it. So I certainly like that about this beer, absolutely. Yeah, I could sit and smell this all day. I don't drink too many Schwarzbiers actually. I need to try and find some more German ones. The famous one of course is Kostritzer, but I've not tried too many German Schwarzbiers or too many Czech Tmavis, come to think of it. So I need to try a few more dark lagers actually. Need to make an effort for that on the channel once I get through my stockpile I have now. But yeah, the backbone of this beer is kind of what you'd expect. Toasty, well-fired bread crust, kind of wholemealy brown bread, a little bit of a kind of rye bread sweetness in there as well. A little touch of sweet caramel, but then a toasty brown sugary element to it as well. I like how this goes together, certainly. Really like how it goes about its business. But yeah, in terms of I think that covers the malty side of things, to be honest with you. You might get one or two little woody undertones to it, but we'll see how that comes across in the flavour. But on the hoppy side of things, a little touch of earthiness for me, which you're always going to get, but a good kind of big floral aromatic component to this one. It's not overly kind of big and spicy and American in a sense, though it does maintain a little bit of that kind of German kind of how do we say, humbleness, if you like. It has the green component of this beer doesn't jump out all that much, but yeah, you do get a nice little bit of floral character in there, and it's got a good little touch of grassiness to it as well. But the floral notes in this beer for me, I would say, yeah, I would say there's a good little bit of aromaticity to it, a softer kind of grassy element, and yeah, I think that summarises it quite nicely. But yeah, in terms of the fruity side of things then, it's interesting, this one. For me, you do get quite a bit of the orange and a little bit of the kind of citrusy notes out of this one. So I can pick up the Amarillo right away in this. The Amarillo is the one that's going to give you that big oily orangey note. So yeah, you can smell a little bit of a sort of, you do get a wee touch of the kind of mangoey note from the the Citra as well, actually. But you do have, whenever you add these hops into like a dark malt base like this, they're always going to give you a bit of red fruit, and it feels like there's just a kind of sort of figgy, curranty kind of thing going on in this beer as well. So yeah, sort of juicy, figgy underlining, a little bit of a black curranty element to it, and then yeah, there's just a wee citrusy kind of edge to it, a little bit of a lemony, limey note, which is interesting. I think, melon I could see. I don't know if it's just the name of the hop that's making me think that, but I could see a bit of melon on this one. The aroma, I'm just wondering if I'm starting to get a cold. Hopefully it's not the Rona, because I can feel my nose maybe just blocking up a little bit on the right side, but that happens sometimes. But on the left side it seems to be good. But yeah, on the fruity side of things, definitely a good citrusy element to it. Orangey, big oily orange from the Amarillo, a wee bit of mango in there, and as I say, you've got that kind of figgy, black curranty sort of thing coming out of it, and a wee citrusy, oily vibe to it there, a little bit of melon, maybe a bit of a kind of lemon limey thing. So yeah, it's an interesting aroma coming out of this one. I would describe the fruits overall as being a touch oily, but I think that works for them. I would say that definitely works for this beer. So yeah, take a little bit of time and just enjoy the aroma of this one before you get stuck into it. But yeah, I think this is quite an interesting one. It definitely has a little bit of a kind of black IPA sort of vibe to it. I mean, I don't think if I was to smell this blindly, I don't think I would be able to tell you that it was a black lager rather than a black IPA, in honesty. But yeah, let's have a taste of this one then. So this one is the Black Sheep, a black IPL, I guess we should say. It's 6% ABV from Hyllie Bryggeri in Malmö, just to the south of, in Skåne, here in the south of Sweden. Brain's not working. Let's get stuck in. Slange, skål, cheers. Straight away though on the mouthfeel, lager. Lager all the way. Yeah. Aroma wise, it definitely comes across. It's a little bit black IPA like, but in the flavour, it's definitely in the mouthfeel, lager all the way. Yeah, this is interesting for sure. It's definitely a more kind of roasty, toasty thing as well. It's definitely one of the roasty and toastier sort of Schwarzbier type things I've come across. But I'm going to say straight away, it's another solid Hyllie beer. I've said this in other reviews, these guys really know what they're doing with lagers. They really know what they're doing with lagers. I'd love to see them have a wee go at some of the Czech type lagers as well. If they did things like that. A Vienna lager. Now that would be an interesting thing from Hyllie Bryggeri. But I'm going to say, if they're going to do that, 440 cans, not 330s. Definitely not 330s. That was the problem with the Skåne lager. That was in a 330, but now it's in the 440s, which is great. But yeah, you can tell straight away this is a solid done beer. Like, these guys really know what they're doing with lager beers, 100%. So yeah, where do we start with this one then? It is actually, to be honest, this beer, it's one of these ones that's not really surprising in what it gives you, but it's just a really solid offering, and that's what we've come to expect from Hyllie Bryggeri, to be quite honest with you. You're going to get solid beer from these guys. But yeah, let's go for it then. So straight away across the middle of the palate, you can feel that nice toasty, well-fired bread crust. That dominates the middle of your palate there. On top of it though, you do get a bit of a smoother kind of brown bready element to it, but I mean, as the flavour progresses, it definitely dries out, and this beer does have a good bit of malty bitterness to it the further you go into the aftertaste. If you go to the front corners of your palate and diagonally back, you're going to get a little bit of you are definitely going to get a little bit of say, a little touch of a woody element to it, but that's kind of a minimal thing in the aftertaste. It is quite a straight shooting beer, definitely. So yeah, toasty, well-fired bread crust, brown bready elements on top of it, and in the centre of your palate there's a wee sweet caramelly element coming out of it, and as you move further out from that, you can feel it gets more toasty and brown sugary like as you go further away from the centre of your palate. But I mean, I really like how this how all of that goes together. So yeah, interesting. And I think when the liquid's on your tongue, it's actually really, really sweet. The middle part of your palate, the sort of sweet brown sugary element to it is quite, it does have a good little bit of sweetness to it. I mean, overall, I do wonder, if I had this beer and I tasted it blind, would I be able to tell that it was a lager rather than a black IPA? I'm not so sure about that. I'd probably think it was very light in the mouthfeel. But it's such, a black IPL is just such an unusual style to come across, because it is more hoppy. It is definitely more hoppy. I think if I tasted this blind, I wouldn't know exactly what it is. But yeah, maybe I need to think about this going forward. Maybe there's more breweries going to try this style. But yeah, it's interesting, this one. It is. Yeah, this idea of a black IPL, I think, is quite interesting. So it's just basically a black IPA with a bit of a lighter mouthfeel, to be honest with you. That's how I would kind of describe this beer. So it's an interesting idea, but I do wonder at the same time, if you're doing a lager at 6%, if you're doing a lager beer at 6%, then is there any point doing it as a lager rather than doing it as an ale? I just wonder this. It's because that's the only real difference for me with this beer is the mouthfeel from a black IPA. Interesting food for thought, definitely. So I don't really know why. Yeah, it's just a really interesting train of thought, that, because I mean, I would love to see like a genuinely authentic sort of Schwarzbier from these guys and just see how they would interpret it. But I think that's maybe one of the ideas they've had with this one, is because their lagers are so good. That's maybe why they've gone down the lager route rather than just doing a black IPA. And I think we had a black IPA from them. Quite recently, to be honest. So yeah, I would love to see, as I say, it'd be nice to see a checked Mavi, a slightly breadier and yeastier checked Mavi, as well as a straight up German Schwarzbier. That could be a really interesting one. A Vienna lager as well, I would love to see from Hyllie, definitely. But that's to take nothing away from this beer. I'm just thinking, basically just kind of blabbing out loud, if you like, thinking out loud when it comes to this. But again, it's really nice. But it does make you think. After 2,800 reviews, you want beers that are going to make you think a little bit, and this one does. So you have to give that to Hyllie Bryggeri. They are making me think a little bit. So yeah. But I like this one. I do like this one. So yeah, border region between middle third and back third of your palate, you do get a wee bit of a slightly thicker bready note to it, and an even sort of more bitter bread crusty element. And then on the back third of your palate, again, you can feel some of the roasty toasty grains just coming out on the beer there too. And you do get a little bit of a kind of yeasty kind of component just sitting on top of that back third of your palate as well. It just feels nice and slightly airy and lighter, if you like. But yeah, middle of the palate in this beer is really nicely executed. Straight, it's got a good bit of depth to it, but it's straight shooting enough for a lager beer, in my opinion. So yeah, interesting. But on the hoppy side of things, then, back corners of the palate, you do have a nice little bit of earthiness there. That builds a good bridge with the kind of black malty backbone of the beer. But as you move further forward, it smoothens out a little bit. You get a little bit of herbal quality. Then as you move further forward on the towards the front corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of floral aromaticity there. It does build a little bit of bitterness, which is nice. And then round the front curve of the palate, it's got a bit of lighter grassy character to it as well. So yeah, the fruity side of this beer, I think, is pretty nice. So the green component matches it quite well. So yeah, it's got a little bit of a German noble kind of character to it as well, which is another thing that maybe gives it away as being a lager rather than an ale, to be honest with you. But yeah, nice kind of smooth green component to this one. It's definitely not too bitter from that perspective, but the fruity side of the beer matches that quite well. So yeah, let's move into that fruity side of things and examine that then. So the fruity component of the beer is interesting. I mean, on that front third of your palate, as I always say, that's where you get that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. It's not really oily, it really is quite slick more than anything else. On that border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again you get a little bit of breadiness with the beer in a very kind of dark grainy sort of thing. Then underneath there's a little bit of a kind of toasty, grainy element as well. Like I say, that's forming the well-fired bread crust is forming the backbone of that fruity component of the beer. So yeah, it does have a wee bit more bitterness to it, especially as you progress into the aftertaste. But yeah, let's look at the fruity side of the beer. So it's interesting because when you take it in, you do get a wee bit of a kind of juicy red fruity sharpness to it, but at the same time, underneath that, at the very back of that front third of your palate, you do get a wee bit of a kind of almost grapefruity, passion fruity note. And as you move further forward, you can get a little touch of mango out of the beer, but then as you move into that front half of the front third of your palate, you get the oily oranges from the Amarillo. Then you get a wee bit of a kind of melony, gooseberry type thing at the very front tip of the palate, which is the Hyllie melon. It's going to give you that. Hyllie melons, it's interesting to see how that behaves in with a dark malt base, because of course when hops are really dependent on the malt base. If you put them in a sweet caramelly malt base, they'll be a bit more oily. If you put them in a New England malt base, more kind of, pardon me, creamy. And then a lot of them tend to develop red fruity characters if you put them in a dark malt base like this one, and you can see a little bit of that here. I think the Hyllie melon is coming across a little bit more gooseberry like rather than anything. So that's an interesting point about this one. Definitely orangey leaning, but a little bit of gooseberry coming out of this one, and then just a little bit of a grassy, zesty element on the tip of your tongue. But yeah, this is a really interesting beer, this one, in terms of how it goes together. It's very nice. I do wonder, as I say, the thing earlier, I do wonder, is there a point in having a black IPL? Because all this, the only real difference between this beer and a black IPA is the mouthfeel. It's just a very slick, light, drinkable beer, this one. So yeah, that's interesting. As I say, it's an interesting idea to try it out and see how it works, and it certainly does work quite well. But in terms of how it kind of plays out in the palate, it is just like a lighter mouthfeel black IPA rather than anything. So yeah, interesting to think about. But I like it. As I say, it's as you always get from Hyllie Bryggeri. It is a well-crafted beer, this one. So yeah, I think I would like to see a regular Schwarzbier, like a straight-up Schwarzbier from these guys at some stage. And I'd also quite like to see I'd also quite like to see a Vienna lager. That would be really interesting. But yeah, interesting idea, and it works. It definitely does work. But yeah, I don't see, as I say, I don't see the black IPL, moving mountains and stuff like that in the beer scene. But I think it's the beer itself. This one is good. But yeah, in terms of the mouthfeel then, because as I say, that's what's different about this beer. This one is kind of bottom end and mid-bodied, top end light-bodied. It's nice and drinkable. I guess that's probably your use for it, is the fact that it is a little bit more kind of drinkable and slick, if you like. But there is a little bit of crispness to the carbonation. Very slick mouthfeel overall, as I said. In terms of IBUs, I think this beer, there's a good bit of bitterness from the malty side of things, so probably about 30-40 IBUs in that kind of regard. This beer does have a good bit of smoothness to it, I suspect, from the wheat that it has in there. But yeah, maybe about 40 IBUs, smooth mouthfeel, a little bit of sweetness, and then you've got some nice, juicy, and also slightly slick and sweet fruity characters coming out of it. But yeah, I like how this beer goes about its business. Definitely, I think it's another solid offering from Hyllie Bryggeri. A few style questions going around in my brain just now, but I've certainly enjoyed this one, and it's a very drinkable dark beer. So this is it is definitely an option for those who like Schwarzbiers. It is basically just a slightly hoppier Schwarzbier, to be honest. So yeah, interesting. Definitely one that's made me think a little bit, but that's what you want after 2,800 reviews. I think we'll end it there, because I could kind of blab on about that all day, but we'll leave it just now. But yeah, this was the Black Sheep, a black IPL, dark hoppy lagers they're calling it. Another really solid offering, I think, from Hyllie Bryggeri, and I certainly wouldn't hesitate to drink it again. So yeah, awesome stuff, and I look forward to seeing what lager they bring out next. I'd love to see an authentic Dunkel, a Vienna lager, One of those, I think, would be an interesting offering. But yeah, so thank you again for watching my reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Hyllie Bryggeri, and I look forward to reviewing more of their beers at some point in the near future. Slàinte, skål, cheers, and catch you guys on the next one.